In 1997, when I was going to college, I came up here to Seattle and met with Gabe Newell and the team when they were making their first game, of course, Half-Life. And I wrote a story about the making of it called The Final Hours of Half-Life. I did it again for Half-Life 2, and today I'm happy to announce that in 2020, I will be writing another Final Hours about the next project. So what is it? Well, it's a new Half-Life project. It's called Half-Life ALYX, a full-blown virtual reality prequel to Half-Life 2. And right here on floor 14, just off the lobby, for the past few years, a team of more than 50 folks at Valve have been working in absolute secrecy building this project. They're working on it right here now. I've been up here quietly over the past couple of years, chronicling the development of that game. I'm sure you have lots of questions about this. I can't believe it's actually happening. And today we're gonna give you a little bit of a taste of what's been going on at Valve over the past decade, why now is the right time to talk about this project and bring it out in 2020. Here we go. I know we'll get into this in Final Hours, but there have been a lot of other games that you guys have worked on in the past 9 years that people have just never heard about or never shipped, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, along the way, building Source 2, we tried various games in different franchises. And each of them kind of moved the engine forward in some way and explored some idea. And they were all backburnered, for good reasons, I think. But they were more like milestones along the way to get to where we are now with Half-Life ALYX. And I think it'd be really fun to delve into those.
We will. I think some people think that, Valve's off, counting its money or not, not making games, and you guys, been here working on a bunch of projects. But then I think it, brings obviously to this one and why this, why now? And some people would probably cynically say Valve has to go back to making games now that, Epic's chipping away at Steam and, Artifact wasn't necessarily the hit everyone wanted it to be. And that's not what happened, but can you maybe kind of talk about how you got to the point of Half-Life ALYX, and we'll get into the fact that it's VR and whatnot, but how did this sort of begin as an idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go back to around 2016 or so when the Vive shipped, right? And I think there was, our feeling after we shipped the Vive and the lab was aligned, I think, fairly cleanly with what we were seeing a bunch of customers say at the time, which was where's the big VR title, right? Where's the thing, a lot of people could see the promise of the VR as a platform, but
the lab was awesome. I love that. That was like an experiment, right?
Very happy with the lab.
I think the lab was, a combination of our efforts at understanding the mechanics of VR, and I think, and a lot of the industry as a whole was doing all kinds of really interesting experimentation in the mechanics of VR. I think, and then so when customers were saying, "Where's the big VR game?" one of the things we had to do around that time is to sort of ask, "Well, what do they mean then?" Because we thought the lab was a big game. We thought a lot of those other great indie devs and so on were making great VR games as well. And so it seemed like to us that a bunch of people were asking, "Where's the big sort of all-encompassing content for all that you get in a big AAA title of some kind?"
High production values.
And if there are many reasons why it was and still is hard to justify building something of that scope in VR, we felt like that was a role we could fill because we can certainly invest in sort of longer term strategies around putting more effort and money and time into something that we may expect a return in for an audience like VR. So back in 2016 we shipped the lab and we started doing experiments on what other things we could do with this.
I remember when Gabe was saying we're working on 2 or 3 VR things or something. There was ideas, and so it wasn't let's do a Half-Life VR game. It was let's do a big VR game.
No, it was definitely let's do a big VR game.
Okay.
And then we explored different franchises. We kind of ruled out multiplayer just because of the small audience for VR.
Right.
And other issues as well with VR avatars and things like that.
Yeah.
And we kind of settled on Portal or Half-Life as interesting. And Portal is so much about, flinging yourself through space and through portals that we thought, well, we're gonna make a bunch of people sick with this game.
And that's why the lab or the Aperture Hands, that was in the Portal universe and that kind of worked, but you're right, a full-on Portal game.
Yeah, full-on Portal game seemed challenging, and then we looked at Half-Life and kind of the DNA of that product. And a bunch of the elements seemed really enhanced by VR.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Half-Life is about this cadence of story, combat, puzzle, exploration, interaction, you know, environmental art, vistas, things like that. And they all seem to be enhanced or reinvented in interesting ways by VR.
Yeah.
And so as we explored that, I mean, you guys were, I wasn't on the team at the time, but you guys were doing the prototype.
Yeah, with Dario and a small group of us, we basically literally started with Half-Life assets, so Half-Life 2 assets. So we built this short, like 15-minute, I think it was our intention was to build 15 minutes of a Half-Life experience using Half-Life's textures, Half-Life assets. I think we stole Counter-Strike's gloves that they hadn't even shipped yet in Counter-Strike at the time.
So combat stuff.
Sorry. No, we needed hands for that.
Right, yeah.
But yes, all the combat stuff in the game was just running straight Half-Life 2 AI, just in VR.
All
and
the assets are 12 years old.
yeah, it was, it was.
No, I was saying, I remember
very
like
nostalgic.
over the years, I've always been wondering, it's like, oh, when are they going to touch those assets? Or like secretly I'd ask about like, you know, getting the G-Man for something, and it's like, see if they had a new model, but no, it's like the same model
it's the
from
same
like,
way, yeah.
you know. I mean, Dario, you were on the, you know, shipping the original game when I was here in like 1997. You know, even though you guys said, hey, it would be cool to do something Half-Life with this, you know sort of what comes with that, right? Like sort of touching that IP again. And I think a lot of us watching this today and are like, we never thought this day was actually gonna come. Like, was there trepidation when you guys finally said like, yeah, we could do Half-Life, but like,
there was a reason it was a small team doing it at a time.
Maybe that was easier because we started this as an exploration of VR mechanics rather than, hey, we're going to start on Half-Life, whatever it's going to be.
So it's kind of focused around
you can
that.
say it. No.
Yeah.
Half-Life, whatever. Just like
And that made it a lot easier because we were just sort of, what can we do? How can we translate the Half-Life mechanics to the VR and, you know, the hands and the headset? And it was a really, like, it was immediately really obvious there's a lot of potential here with this stuff. And just like one after another, we put these Half-Life mechanics into VR.
Right.
Some of them worked really well. Some of them were pretty comical up front, but there were enough that were really promising that we just sort of organically grew as we saw.
As Dave was saying, like the sort of cadence, the DNA of Half-Life, as we started to put people through this 15-minute sort of prototype, they would spend 45 minutes in it, doing a bunch of stuff that we'd never really seen. They exhibited a bunch of behaviors we'd never really seen players exhibit in the sort of more flat screen 2D, you know, desktop environment, where they spend a lot more time paying attention to the environment and looking around and exploring, and all those like that kind of behavior really dovetailed very nicely with the sort of core DNA of Half-Life. And so we were really excited, because if players are exhibiting that kind of interest in exploring their environment before we've even really got any reason to explore it in this prototype.
And the fact that it was so incredibly low fidelity.
It
was almost comical.
Yeah,
but it didn't seem to matter, because like the sense of immersion, the sense of being there was powerful enough that.
No, and now having played through it, I mean, that sense of immersion, it's just, I mean, what you guys have done visually with it and the look, I mean, it is absolutely Half-Life. I think that's something that will probably surprise people. I think there was rumors like, oh, you guys might be doing some kind of, you know, Half-Life VR thing, and people are probably expecting it, you know, small, you know, room with old assets. Like, this is like a full-blown AAA production, which is absolutely incredible to see kind of what you and the team have put together. But the big question I think everyone is going to have, it's like, you know, VR is an emerging market. A very small percentage of, you know, probably Half-Life fans and customers have VR. So I'm sure some people are like, great, you're doing Half-Life, we're super excited that's happening, but like, why does this have to be VR only? Which, you know, is a fair concern for people, right? It's like, are they forcing me to buy VR to have the next Half-Life experience? Is that just because, you know, you think the opportunity for innovation was sort of in the VR space with this? Like, you're not doing a flat screen version of this game, right?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to be delivering a version of this that you could play with a mouse and a keyboard, but like as we said, it began as an exploration of VR, and the more we used the controllers and the headset, we realized the amount of interactions this gives, the amount of possibilities these things give us. The more we explored it, the more we realized that there's so much opportunity that we can't really translate back to the keyboard when you can track your hands separately from your head.
Yeah.
They're all 3D space, all simultaneously tracking and moving. You just can't really get that with a mouse and keyboard. And when you put that into game mechanics, the kinds of interactions that we can do now, we couldn't possibly do with a mouse and keyboard. Like interacting with doors is like one of the most obvious things. I mean, you've played, so you've seen.
No, it's so fun, and I think the thing, like what I will say about the combat stuff, is when you're pulling a clip and putting the gun and like ducking for cover. I mean, there's funny videos of me playing this thing where you're, literally on the floor and ducking. I mean, it's like the combat is truly immersive and visceral, and it reminds me of like classic Half-Life, but it's so much different. I mean, I'm sure you could potentially map some of that to like a mouse or controller, but it's just,
the amount of
it's
complexity
better.
that's going on there, it's so hard to, we would have to map an entire section of the keyboard dedicated just to interacting with doors if we wanted to have that kind of functionality. Whereas it's so intuitive for you because you know how the door works and you can sort of crack it open a little bit with one hand and put,
and put the gun through and like pull it back.
Peek through, you can knock it open, you can drop a grenade in and close the door. And like,
there's one sequence in the game where it's literally like you literally open it, throw something, and close it, and it's like that's what makes it so unique and fun, and that's what I think Half-Life has always represented, is like innovation in play style and what it is, and I think there's innovation there in how you play, which I think, as you said, might not translate to.
Yeah, and like the more we explored those mechanics, the more we realized that in order for us to deliver a keyboard and mouse experience, we'd have to ship a game with that's missing a lot of those interactions, and they were playtesting so well that we didn't feel like that was a good idea.
Well, yeah, you'd end up watering down the VR experience, or to try to do both at the same time.
Right.
And the process was really, what can we do with these controllers and the HMD? And so that, as we explored that idea, it just drove us into this place where the game became essentially VR rather than just kind of superficially VR.
Yeah.
And it would be, like Dario said, really hard to support those mechanics on a keyboard.
A lot of cases, almost impossible.
Yeah.
I just can't
And you're
see how
supporting
they would
other,
pull it off.
and it's not just Index, right? It's supporting like Vive and Oculus and
Right.
beyond,
we want
multiple PC headsets, right?
Everyone that we can get to be able to play this, we want to be able to play it.
Yeah.
And our requirements, track controllers is sort of one of the main things, just because, as Dario says, we do so much with players. We're constantly asking the player to be doing things simultaneously with both hands.
Oh, it's a workout when you're going
The
through
amazing
it.
thing is it's all intuitive. You're not learning bindings of a keyboard to, you press this and then something happens. It's all.
No, I said when you're pulling the clip,
exactly
reloading
as
the
you-
gun, and it's like it's a whole nother. It's a new way of playing, but is really deep and immersive. And then you layer on, I think the fact that you've got great story here and great characters and the things that people love about Valve kind of in this environment as well. It's a prequel, if people don't know, starring Alex. I'm sure the question, of course, will come up. You wouldn't even say it, but like Half-Life 3, I'm sure some people are like, why is this not Half-Life 3? Why is this a prequel? So can you sort of explain like timeline, how that all kind of came together? Because you said, let's do Half-Life, but it's like, just carry it forward, guys.
Yeah, I think Robin is the perfect person to answer this question.
Time to leave.
Yeah. In all honesty, back in 2016 when we started this, Half-Life was just a terrifying, Half-Life 3, terrifyingly daunting prospect, right? And I think to some extent, VR was a way we could fool ourselves into believing we could, we had a way to do this. Because by starting with VR and then trying to think about Half-Life and how it worked with it and playtesting those, you're immediately in a space where we have something we understand well, Half-Life's core gameplay, and a new platform with new prospects and new possibilities, and we can do that translation, and then we can watch people play it. And so within a week or two, we're starting to learn. We're able to watch someone go through it. And so it was really easy to not try and think about the big picture of like, we're making Half-Life 3 and just focus on, let's figure out what people enjoy in this, and let's make forward progress. And in some ways, like VR was a little bit, like the sort of, like the way the gravity gun helped us in Half-Life 2, where that became the tent pole that you could wrap so much
That
around.
innovation around it.
Exactly. And so VR became this thing that we could wrap everything around.
Kind of like a rail to slide along for design,
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair.
Whereas Half-Life 3, if it's like, hey, tomorrow you're working on Half-Life 3, you're like, oh God.
No, and they said the expectation, as you
Terrifying.
said, there's a safety to sort of doing a VR thing, whereas you said doing a full-blown, Half-Life 3 is it has crazy expectations.
Yeah,
and,
sort of. It's completely wide open in terms of what you're gonna.
And then we were handed, well, we found this VR as the platform, as the backbone of this project. We didn't have to find it.
Right.
It was right there.
Yeah, and then by the time, we started to realize, like we started making a bunch of progress and seeing things that were working long before we get to the point of deciding how big is this thing we're building. And so we were able to, by the time you start, I think, really dramatically increasing our aspirations for the product and realizing, no, this should be big. We've got a lot already that, we've already got a bunch of success behind us.
The scale of what you're doing, I think you said the characters and the world and the combat, and when you see City 17, realized in true high definition, right? And that's the thing is to me, like the characters and the world, it's deeply immersive and it's in your mind's eye, like what you want,
And a real
this world
scale.
like. Oh yeah, I mean that's what like
scale
the first moment in the game, not to spoil too much of the game, but when you first walk outside and you're like, wow, there's little, and like the way that the sound and the visuals, it touches you, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of us thought we would never get to see from you guys. And even I'm sure some
never in this interview.
Well, but the thing is, I would also say what I like about this project is that a lot of folks that have come to Valve, in the past decade, are working on this as well, right? And they probably came to Valve saying, hey, maybe one day I'll get to work on a Half-Life. And I think if, the Campo Santo guys are involved in this, Jay, Eric, writing Portal 2, they're now working on this. A lot of the, folks that came here never got to work on a Half-Life game. So it must be is there kind of a motivation to the team now, which is, exciting that everyone's like, we're finally doing this?
Oh, everyone is. For
sure.
There's a hell of a lot
It's
of
really easy
excitement
to recruit for this project.
Yes,
Yeah.
Surprisingly enough.
Once we had something that a bunch of the company could play, then I think, it is really exciting having this combination of a bunch of people who have a deep understanding and experience building building content that uses the kind of DNA Dave was talking about, the sort of core of Half-Life, but then having a bunch of this new, fresh perspectives, in some cases from people who have built games elsewhere that were inspired by some of that original DNA, and then returning, learning their own ways of doing things, and then having that join sort of the experience we have. I think, we were really able to get to some places, especially around narrative, I think, in this product that the best stuff we've ever done. And we're really excited.
I would agree with that. I think, you're not just doing a Half-Life VR game, you're kind of pushing not only the VR medium, but I think just the industry forward with some of the stuff you're doing in this game and how you're blending combat and gameplay and dialogue. And that's why I said it's classic Valve, and those moments I remember from the first Half-Life where, my CD would spin up with the audio and we'd go into great combat scenarios, and that, the DNA of that I feel like is in this. It just happens to be in VR.
Very flattering.
Which
That's
is
good to
no,
hear.
I believe me. I'm excited to kind of tell more of that story next year of how you guys got here, and again, all the things that have happened behind the scenes. But I think, one thing everyone will probably see this and say okay, Valve's back, right? In a sense of making these games, not that far away, we hope, right? March, you're calling it, right?
Yep.
In the trailer. But I think people probably wonder, okay, moving forward, does this mean that Valve now is just making VR games? Are we going to get that Half-Life 3 or that new big epic kind of Valve game down the road? Or is it oh, now we're making VR games, that's what we do?
We're very excited about this, but until we ship, you never know. Maybe we're all really wrong and it's terrible.
We have to wait and see what the results are like.
But to some extent, wait and see.
But what it is, it's been such a long wait. I think people are okay, and I personally, this is just me saying this, but I think it feels to me like a bridge to more, because the tech that you guys have there, the way it looks, the way it plays, the way it feels, it gets me excited about where you guys
We're very
go.
excited about building more Half-Life. That's for
yeah.
sure. We have had an absolute blast building this game. In some ways, for a bunch of us who have been off on, a lot of multiplayer stuff, other things for years, it is incredibly fun to be back building single-player products again. It's so much fun just to work on them, watching one playtester after a time, one playtester after another, just go through this experience and just hone it so carefully around them, especially in VR where playtesters emote so much more in there. You can see their whole body,
Respond to the situation.
Panicking, dropping clips on the ground as they fumble their weapons because there's zombies in front of them. All these things, it's been really fun watching playtests. Anyway, so it's been really fun to build this. I think, wherever we go next, or whatever platform, whatever, we focus on, I think we're excited.
Come on,
that's
Robin,
gonna
say it. No, you
we wanna
said
go
the
on.
engine is now at a point where it's like you can do this stuff, though, right?
Yeah, the engine
Yeah,
is ready now. I think it's like Robin says, we want to put this out and see how the world reacts to it before we make any concrete plans about what we do next.
No, it just I love that you've got the team and the energy here. It feels like to ship stuff and do
Definitely
more.
have
Whether
that,
that's
yes. Yeah, for sure.
another Half-Life or a brand new IP. I think what I just get excited about is this group making new stuff moving forward. So can't wait to see what's next. All right, well we get March 2020 Half-Life Alyx coming out, and again, we'll do the final hours next year. It's been so fun to do those with Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Portal, and that will take everyone through really the past decade at Valve and all that you guys have been through, all the experiments that you don't know about, and obviously the making of this game. So thanks for doing this for everyone watching, because it's like I think this is the day that we didn't think was ever going to come. So
Yeah.
Well,
anything can
it's
happen.
really fun getting that.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Awesome. All right, thanks guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you.